Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we reclaim virtue to bring it to our home and yours. And I'm Thomas McCuddy.
And I'm Thomas Quackenbush.
I'm Nick Wiegand, and tonight's conversation is going to be navigating sibling conflict. I hope that by the end of this, we have some magic tool where we can just break up all sibling rivalries. But I want to just start us off by talking about Scripture, and that if you have this problem in your home, you're not the first. I want to bring you back to Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau, and Joseph and his brothers. If you don't know those references, get in your Bible more. But so I know that in our homes, this is a problem with almost all siblings, even the ones that get along most of the time. There's still this conflict that we have to somehow be able to manage. I want to start off by, if we ignore it and say things like, "Oh, they're just brothers," or "Oh, just sisters," what are we at risk by just allowing it to continue?
Well, I think what we've seen as a youth pastor, so watching teenagers grow up in other families, watching this conflict dwell and remain, and if it doesn't magically go away, something doesn't change, they will carry this straight into adulthood, and then once you're out of the house, you don't come back together.
No,
right. We typically don't hang around people we don't like if we can help it. And so, I mean, they'll see each other with family events and those things, but they don't. Their relationship was broken long ago.
Right.
And I think there is sometimes kind of this cultural, well, kids are just being kids, and well, it just happens. But we forget that sin, and when there's conflict, something has gone wrong. And usually, maybe not always, but usually there is some sort of vice in play. And I think in our home, the key word we keep bringing out is selfishness. That the selfishness is driving so much of this conflict.
Sure. Yeah.
That they want what they believe is their due. They don't want the other one to have more. Mm-hmm. So even when they're getting something, if the other has more, that creates conflict. And so it's a vice of selfishness. And so not only are you going to have the broken relationship between the two, but if you have these vices that go unchecked, they're going to carry those into adulthood. And now you're not just impacting, it's not just the impact of the sibling relationship, it's going to impact their relationship with their spouses. Mm-hmm. It's going to impact their relationship in their works. Mm-hmm. I mean, like it's going to be destructive, and you can identify these kinds of things early. You can see that, and even to the point where I had a friend of mine who his daughters, and she was probably 6 or 7, and the son was like 8 or 9. He's like, yeah, my son, he's probably going to be a preacher, and she's probably going to end up in jail. And as young as they were, what we were looking at is the trajectory. Mm-hmm. Like, if you carry these dispositions into adulthood, this will not end well. And that's what happened. Like, it was never dealt with. And it shocked me because I'm like, but if you see it, why not at least try to rectify this, curb it, deal with it? Yeah. And I think that's the call with this episode, is that we don't want to just like bring a hammer down, and we don't want to, and we always talk about with the virtuous, the middle ground. We don't want to overreact. But I think in the grand scheme of things, from what my experience has been, most parents tend to underreact. Yeah. They tend not to be more involved and more like, let's talk about what's fueling this. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about what's causing this. It's more of stop hitting your brother or stop yelling at each other. And we're just trying to get them to like function well, but we're not dealing with the root, because the root of all vice is going to be a disordered love.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They're not loving correctly. And I think that's the conversation we need to bring up today, and how to have those kinds of conversations with the kids when this kind of conflict comes about.
And so I'm going to start us off with Psalm 133:1. And Psalm 133:1 reads, it's a Psalm of David. Behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. It is like the precious oil on the head, running down on the beard of Aaron, running down on the collar of his robes. It is like the dew of Hermon, which falls on the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord has commanded the blessing, live forevermore. Now, I don't know if they're talking. I don't think he's talking about blood brothers, but I think it's just the idea, the nature of what brotherhood ought to be like. And when siblings get along well, it is just a beautiful and glorious thing.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, it is more. It seems as if it is more disordered than not.
Yeah.
And so obviously it's an issue. Like I said, we go back to Adam and Eve. I feel like they were probably pretty good parents. Maybe they didn't have all the self-help books. Maybe they needed more.
They kind of had no examples,
Right.
So.
Well, and then we have Cain and Abel. So I mean, like, now they were adults, but there was this. It's. I think we need to take comfort, at least somewhat, in the fact that this is a tale as old as time. But as parents, we need to do something. So, going back to what you said, it needs to be handled.
Mm-hmm.
How do we handle it? So I think one of the ways is, as parents, setting an example.
Yeah.
How do we set the example to teach them how to be able to deal with each other?
It's difficult. Definitely a difficult question, because the nature. As I was an only child growing up, and so my first experience, I had friends that would fight, and they would get it. I just figured it's just one of those natural things that happens, just living in close quarters. And as Thomas mentioned, if you have vice, it's going to come out in those types of situations where you're living with that person and you're sharing the love of your parents with that person in some sense. I didn't really experience that until I had started having children, and then I had another child, and they're 18 months apart, and most of the time they're best friends, and they just they're lost when they're not around each other, even to this day. But there's other times where they just look at each other the wrong way, and they're just at each other's throats. And I'm just like, what are we even doing? And then when we had our third child, my middle son and her, just their personalities are so similar that they just clash. And just she can't even look at him without him getting upset, and vice versa. And really, it's like she's vying for his attention, but he's just kind of withholding that from her and criticize. Like, there's all kinds of stuff going on, and so this is all new. I'm like, don't do that anymore. Well, that doesn't really work, because we're dealing with children with sin natures and vices and other things. And so I had to figure out how to repair those relationships, and I think it can't be a cookie cutter kind of thing that's going to work for every child. They're all different. One of the things I realized, my middle child, he's one that you can reason with. So I had to over and over again to explain to him why this behavior towards his sister is just, number one, completely awful, that he's to blame for it, because he's going to point his finger at her. She made me do it. Well, that's not true. No one can make you do anything. You do it because you're reacting to something. And so it's frustrating, but when I'm able to reason with him and explain it to him, because I'm like, this relationship, and you guys were mentioning earlier, doesn't necessarily, just because you're brother and sister and you're blood related, doesn't mean that the relationship, you'll have one if you don't establish one as you're growing up. Like my wife and her siblings, I mean, maybe as adults are starting to talk a lot more, maybe on a group text, but their relationship they never had a good relationship because they never built one. And no one was there to deal with, and the parents weren't there because they worked all the time. So they just kind of, this is just the way life is. We're just going to survive together rather than actually thriving together as a family.
And I think that's why with younger siblings, as children, their vices are much stronger. They're learning how to regulate. They're learning how to be functioning humans. And they're bad at it. And they're clashing together. So I think that's why you're going to see more of it. I think the same thing happens, even among spouses. If you don't cultivate and nurture that relationship, you drift apart, you break. So.
And I know this isn't all the time, but I don't want to, after we just get done saying how our children kind of go at each other every once in a while. It probably shouldn't say it this way, but I'm going to anyway. Their main example of interpersonal conflict resolution, interpersonal communication, is watching mom and dad and how they communicate with each other, watching how dad and mom communicate with the children. And so they have their only main example in their life is mom and dad, and how mom and dad's interpersonal relationships are with everyone else in the family. And so I'm not saying all the time they're just mirroring that, but it's really hard to build cohesiveness and love and good communication skills if they're always just getting yelled at, always just, being thinking they're irritating, and they're just going to mirror that as
appropriate behavior
as it rolls downhill.
That was
because just to kind of piggyback off of that, so one of the things I realize in myself, and kind of something that I'm kind of really trying to correct in my own relationship with my kids, is that I'm like, a lot of times we're a lot nicer to people that are strangers because we're out in the world. We don't we're very polite to them. And then we come home and we're around our family, we're like, instead of saying, excuse me, we're like, get out of my way. Like, it's like just moving and expecting them to bend to your will because you're dad or whatever. And I realized I'm not if I want my kids to treat each other right, I got to treat them right in terms of how I talk to them.
Right.
And, they see me out in public and how kind I am to people. And then I come home and I'm in a bad mood, and I use that as an excuse to just be kind of, just say things that are on my mind and that bother me or whatever. And I'm not that polite as I should be with my family as I am with complete strangers. And so that's something that, well, especially since really God put that, since I've been saved, really wanted to make sure that I'm not just this kind of double-minded person that's one way and then a different way at home. So I'm now I'm just I have to give my kids the attention. I have to we're sitting down undivided because I want to make sure they know that I care, and then I give them that they have my respect. And
well, that's one of the chief complaints from pastors' kids is, not all pastors, of course, obviously not the three of us, but pastors' kids, is that they see how the dad treats the church members and then comes home and doesn't have that same respect and love towards them, and so a lot of kids rebel against that when that happens.
So I think, to speak to your point with the way that we show conflict resolution. So when I was in youth, my youth pastor, I didn't have good models for my parents. I didn't in terms of conflict resolution. No, it wasn't there. But I remember I would always hang out with him, and I remember being at his house one day, we were before church, I was helping out with something, and he and his wife got into it, and I was like, I'm just going to go outside. And he's like, no, you're going to sit down here and you're going to learn how to fight. And I was like, what is about to happen? And what he was doing, what he was saying is that they're in the middle of a conflict, a fight. But he showed me they walked through it, they resolved it. And he, in a sense, he wanted to show me in the real, this is how you do it. And it was hugely impactful for me because I'd never seen that before. And that was the kind of thing, again, I always appreciated that because as a youth pastor, before we had children, I was youth pastoring 10 years without kids, and the youth would be over my house and the same kind of thing happened. Stacy and I had conflict, and I even did the same thing. I was like, no, y'all are going to watch. And that was in ways I showed the teenagers. But then when we had kids, Stacy and I, sometimes when we're having that conflict, we won't shoo the kids off. There's an element, we will work that out right there, and the kids see that. And so,
as long as that's healthy, that's
right,
good.
Right. There's some things they don't need to hear.
Then you have the alternative to that, where parents fight in front of, fight,
right.
Not what we're talking about, where we're talking about having a conversation or a disagreement, but and fight, that's bad.
Because a lot of times those fights, we can use a kind of a Latin word, ad hominem, where we're going to be at that person. They're going to say things that are, degrading to the other person. What you're arguing over is now put on the side, and they're going at each other, and they're saying nasty things. And I think that's it's terrible. And I think especially in relationships where there's this power struggle between the husband and the wife, and she's like, or he or she is trying to undermine the other in front of the kids. Like, those are the types of things. That's
Right.
that's not conflict resolution. That's not something the kids should be witnessing, because they're going to just repeat that behavior.
Right.
That's where we're leaning into our sin and it's on full display.
Yep.
And that's sometimes it could be me, it could be my wife, and that's when we shoo the kids off. We're like, no,
Right.
you need to go somewhere else. We need to deal with this.
Yeah.
But there's other times, and I just think, like Stacy and I, we were having some sort of conflict, and we were at the table and we were working through it. And I remember being very cognizant of my middle child sitting over there, and he was just doing some Lego things that he was doing before. And he sat there, he never looked up. And as we got done, Stacy and I, we have resolved our conflict. And I looked over at him and I'm like, what do you think? What do you think about what you just experienced? And he shared his whole thoughts. He made no motion the whole time that he was even remotely paying attention, but he absorbed every bit of it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, those kinds of moments, you can't construct them. This is why living with your kids and being around them is so critical. I think this is why, if we're not spending that time with our kids, we want to go out, we want to do something, we're doing chores, whatever it is, there's going to be conflicts. There's going to be those moments. There's going to be these misunderstandings. That is the discipleship. That's the true training. Yeah. I think that's what we're missing so many times in our churches, because we try to construct the discipleship. It's like, always come into this group and we're going to do this thing. But doing life together, you're going to get your feelings hurt. You're going to be in a bad mood. These kinds of things are going to happen. And among the children, I think what also, not just showing them the examples, but positively in teaching them, I'm always taking it back to the love. Like, do you love? Do you respect? Why do you do this thing? It's not because they did this thing to you. Mm-hmm. It's because you're lacking in love, or you're just loving yourself so much that you're putting yourself in front of the others. And we're always trying to teach how to properly order the loves, because that's what's going to fuel the virtue. When you love someone and you love something, you do what you desire.
Yeah.
And that's part of what it means to grow up. Yeah. And I think this is the word to parents, is that when you're frustrated with the kids because they're not loving and they're being selfish and they're being sinful and depraved, I think that it's the encouragement I try to give to parents. This is life. This is the battle. You're in the middle of those grounds. And to have that patience, that you're not just simply hoping that it all happens to work out one day. You are doing the kinds of things that are directed towards that good end. And a child can always rebel. A child can always just, no matter how much you reason, no matter how much you try to love, that willfulness can always come into play. But if you're doing what you can as a parent in directing them in that and showing them, I think what I try to remind my wife sometimes is, like, when we're in the middle of, we just had this speech and debate tournament, everybody was tired. We were not our best selves. No. I said, look back, look at the whole, look at where we've come. We had a bad day. Chalk it up. Let's move forward, but let's also learn from it. Let's be mindful that when we're tired, not to continue to overextend ourselves, and just, I think that's where also when I looked at my two younger ones, they're the ones who are having the most conflict. They're closer in age. They share a room, and it can be that same kind of thing. Like, he looked at me.
So I want to challenge a lot of parenting thoughts here.
Yeah.
Because I want to reflect back when I was younger. So my younger brother, there's 5 years separating us. He was in a wheelchair. Well, he's in a wheelchair now, but he's disabled. But he could be a little turd. And so I know you've heard this story, but we were playing I was playing Zelda, and he wanted to play, so he slapped himself in the chest. He'd start crying. My mom would come in, and he'd be like, "Nick hit me." And I'm like, "I didn't hit him." And then she'd wear me out, right? And then this happened like 4 or 5 times. And then the last time he did it again because he wanted to play, because every time it worked and he got to play. So last time he did it, and I just turned around and drilled him square in the chest. Yeah, I know. I'm not supposed to. Yeah, it is.
We do not advocate violence in the program. We're just describing simply what happened.
Yeah, just like Cain and Abel. Like, that's not saying how siblings should treat each other, but it is what happened. But I drilled him straight in the chest. My mom came in, and he's like, "Nick hit me in the chest." She was like, "Did you hit him in the chest?" And that time I said, yes, I did. I think that was the moment she realized. All the other times he was just lying. So I share this story because I want to challenge this idea of what justice really looks like when it comes to siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Age is a dramatic factor.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge factor.
Mm-hmm.
And a brother who is 5 years younger than another brother should not get treated the same.
Mm-hmm.
Should not be punished the same, should not have the same expectations, it's not. So as we talk about this, if you got twins, I guess this part doesn't really pertain to twins. But outside of that, when there is an age separation with these children, justice, which is a virtue that we talk about heavily, justice is different.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not the same bedtime. It's not the same expectations. It's not the same chores. It should not be the same. If you have a brother and a sister, just by general nature of the Christian worldview, those two are not the same, and justice looks different for each of them.
Mm-hmm.
Authority looks different for each of them. And so I want to challenge this heavily, that one of the reasons that there's sibling conflict is because we treat our children the same when there is absolutely no reason to treat the children the same if there is an age gap.
Mm-hmm. If
there is a gender difference. Like, even if they're the same age, but they're just two totally separate kids, justice should, what is just and right and good and true and beautiful for one may not be the same thing for the other.
We have those same conversations that, particularly with my youngest, he does not understand. He cannot regulate certain issues, and we recognize that, and they'll do that. My oldest has a different room, and they're like, why does he get to stay up? I was like, because he's older and he is able to regulate it. There are justice, like you said, I think that goes back to the skewed modern view of justice, is this idea of what we call like the fairness and equity, that everybody gets the same thing.
Right.
And that's not what classical justice is. It never was that. People get what they deserve. And if you cannot comprehend, or you're just in a very different place, there needs to be a different handling, versus like with some of my kids, I've got them and I've looked at them and I was like, you know better, so this makes this worse.
Yeah, you're going to have way steeper punishment.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think most parents are like, well, how do I determine that? This is where prudence, wisdom, this is knowing your kids. I think that's the number one thing I think that surprised me when I was a youth pastor, the number of parents who didn't actually know their kids and understood who they are. You need to spend time with them. You need to really get a sense of who they are, and that's why then you'll know best how to react to them. You'll know how to guide them.
Not even a youth pastor. I mean, as a pastor, I've heard parents say something about their kid, and I look at them, I'm like, and I don't say this out loud, but I think, do you even know your child? Like, that is not your child.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to make sure I got that in there, is that, if we're going to treat our children the same, we're treating them unjustly.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to create sibling conflict by the sheer nature of not trying to do that. But we're going to create it in our own homes.
Yep.
I think you almost create a really bad standard, because when they don't get the same thing, because that's just naturally going to happen, now there's going to be new conflict, because they've not been taught how to regulate. And when someone else gets something that's nicer, but that's because they deserved it, they earned it, whatever it is. I think it's we're doing, like you said, we do them an injustice. And so if
you treat your household like it's a communist household, where you talk about the equity thing, then you're going to be raising children who think that is the way the world should work.
And it's definitely not the biblical worldview. And that's where I think when we have this conflict, it's important to recognize sin is in play, but I think the guiding principle for parents is redemption. How do you redeem these situations?
Sure, yeah.
How do you move beyond this, rather than just suppressing the conflicts? How do you redeem this? How do you move into what's beautiful rather than just what is functional?
It's a good way to end,
Absolutely.
Gentlemen. I appreciate the conversation, as always. You can find us on familiesofvirtue.com and our podcast, Virtuous Roots, on all major streaming platforms. Be blessed, and we'll talk to you next time.